What's going on? It's your boy, Hot Soup, coming to you with an episode of Underachievers for Week 14. You know those guys that are big names we drafted in the first 5 rounds of our draft and just straight flopped. That's right. I had a couple guys go out there and get a bagel. Man, it was a terrible week for big name guys this week. And we're going to start off with Stroud. That's right. The rookie who's been lighting up the fantasy scene for the last half of the fantasy season. Stroud. And I don't want to hear what y'all got to say. Talk about, oh, he got injured. He ain't get injured to the fourth quarter. That man had 91 yards passing. No touchdowns, no nothing. Let me tell y'all something, man. Stroud, if you start him, those owners are sick. That man had 3.4 fantasy points. And I know a lot of y'all was starting him trying to get into the fantasy playoffs. Oh, womp, 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 womp. Stroud is going to have better days, but this week was not his week. And our next quarterback off the board, and who was expecting this? Nobody's benching Jalen Hurts, right? You shoulda. Woo! Terrible week. 197 yards through the air, 30 yards on the ground, no touchdowns, no tush push, and a fumble lost. Listen, man, Jalen Hurts is going to have better days. We all know this. You can't bench him. You just can't do it. But for those of you who started him, womp, 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 8.8 fantasy points for you this week. Hopefully you got in the playoffs or you was already there. If you wasn't and you started him, ooh, that burns. I know it does. But hey, man, it is what it is. He'll have better days. We're going to start talking about our running backs that did terrible. Let's start with Kenneth Walker. Coming off an injury, everybody was starting him. Come on, man. You're not starting Kenneth Walker. You should have benched him. Listen, man, Kenneth Walker had 14 touches, 54 yards, and 5 targets, 0 receptions. Kenneth Walker was 7.4 fantasy points this week. Terrible game. Horrible. Will he have better days? Hopefully. Doesn't matter to me. I ain't got him. And I'm glad I ain't, because I would have started him and I'd have been looking like you. Number 2 on our board for terrible starts this week. I mean, he had a horrible game. Josh Jacobs. Who's benching Josh Jacobs? Very rare. Very few fantasy managers bench Josh Jacobs this week. If you did, kudos to you. You know why? Because Josh Jacobs went off for 15 touches, 50 yards, and that's it. Nothing else. That man had 6 fantasy points this week. From Josh Jacobs, we expecting that in the first quarter. That's right. Got to have better days. You can't bench him. If he's injured, find another option right now. That Las Vegas offense is horrible. Just terrible. Terrible. Let's talk about our next running back off the board, Gus Edwards. Look, get Gus out your lineups. I know what I said 3 weeks ago. I know. Get him in your lineups. Get him in your lineup. Man, listen, I heard what the coach said. Offensive coordinator, we're getting comfortable with Mitchell, meaning Mitchell is going to be getting the ball on first down, second down, third down because he's a pass catching back. The only time y'all will see Gus Edwards, if Mitchell is tired, he just broke a big run, or it's goal line time. Get Gus Edwards out your lineups this week. Y'all ready for this? Gus Edwards, 6 touches, 15 yards, 1.5 fantasy points this week. If you got him, bench him. Rest of the fantasy playoffs, you heard it from the soup. And our first receiver off the board, and this one hurt. And you know what? I was blessed to have the fantasy knowledge to know that when some guys are just going against these tough secondaries, you got to bench them. I benched them in 2 leagues this week, started them in 1. I look like a fool in the one I started him in, Mike Evans. Big play, most consistent. I put him up there with Pittman. I put him above Pittman because of touchdowns. But I'll bench Mike Evans if I got to. I benched him this week, and I'm glad I did. This man had 1 reception. Mike Evans, Mr. Consistent, Mr. 10 seasons in a row of 1,000+ yards, only done by a couple receivers in NFL history. Mike Evans, 6 targets and 1 reception. His managers was pissed. 1.3 fantasy points in week 14 for Mike Evans. Look, if the matchup is good, you got to start him. If the matchup ain't, sometimes you got to start him. What are your options, man? Be smart. Don't be stupid. Keep Mike Evans in your lineups. Amon-Ra St. Brown is our next receiver, and this one hurt everyone because nobody is benching Amon. He is a matchup nightmare, right? Not this week. Amon St. Brown, 9 targets, 3 receptions, 21 yards. That's it. 3.6 fantasy points in standard scoring. Amon St. Brown, you cannot bench him. You got to start him every week, week in, week out. Jared Goff had a terrible outing. So did Amon. So did LaPorta. So did everybody in that offense, except Jahmyr Gibbs. That's right, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown, lineup lock. Just because he had a bad week, we don't bench him. And our last receiver off the board for underachievers, yes, another big name, Stefon Diggs. Boy, those of y'all that were starting Stefon Diggs this week are sick. 6 targets, 2 receptions, 23 yards, 3.7 fantasy points in standard scoring. Horrible outing, but we're not benching him. Again, it's Stefon Diggs, man. He's good for 11 targets a game. Why the target share was so terrible in this game? I mean, y'all seen the game flow. Man, that was Cook's day. It was Cook's day. It is what it is. Stefon Diggs points this week. 4.4 fantasy points. He had 11 targets, 4 receptions, and 24 yards for Stefon Diggs. We know he's going to have better days, but this week was not one of them. Sam LaPorta is our first tight end off the board. Boy, did he stink up the place. I'm talking about close your nose. 6 targets, 2 receptions, 23 yards, 3.7 fantasy points in standard scoring. Yeah, Sam LaPorta is going to have better days. Just a guy you can't bench, man. He's a top 10 tight end. It is what it is. And our last tight end off the board was Dalton Kincaid. Boy, did I thought Dalton was going to have a big game, and he did not. He failed his fantasy owners in week 14. Will he have better days? I'm sure. Is it going to happen in the playoffs? Man, I don't know. Who knows, man? It's any given Sunday. Dalton Kincaid, 5 receptions, 21 yards, was good for 4.6 fantasy points in standard scoring. Obviously, you can't just bench him. If you have a better option, bench him. Yeah. If you don't, got to start him. Kincaid is a target monster, and he is an athlete. He will get into that end zone. Those are your top 10 underachievers for week 14. Come check us out later on this week for our top 5 stars, top 5 sits. We'll talk about it. Go check me out for our episode coming out soon in I Told You So. I Told You So, my favorite episode. Check it out. Come check me out on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. If you go on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, enter it in the comment section. That's what I'm here for. I'll answer you within 24 hours. It's your boy Soup, and I'm out.